The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, operating in coordination with IRGC Aerospace Force coastal defense batteries and integrated drone swarm networks, has executed a systematic closure of the Strait of Hormuz that represents the most catastrophic single strategic event in American naval history since the fall of Saigon. The numbers being confirmed by multiple independent intelligence streams are staggering in their implications. Over 200 fast attack craft, 50 anti-ship cruise missile batteries, 3,000 naval mines deployed across critical shipping lanes, and swarm configurations exceeding 1,500 autonomous kamikaze drones have converted the 21-mile-wide waterway into what Western military planners are now privately calling an absolute kill zone for any vessel attempting passage without Iranian authorization. But the operational reality extends far beyond the immediate closure of maritime traffic. 5,000 American military personnel stationed at forward operating bases throughout the Gulf Cooperation Council states now find themselves in a tactical situation that has no precedent in modern American military planning. Supply lines severed, naval reinforcement impossible, air corridors contested by integrated air defense networks that were activated simultaneously with the strait closure, and escape routes reduced to overland withdrawal through territories where American freedom of movement cannot be guaranteed. The White House Situation Room has been in continuous emergency session for 18 hours. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have presented operational assessments that offer no viable military response that does not risk escalation to regional war with casualty projections that would shatter American political consensus for overseas military commitment. The Secretary of Defense has privately informed allied governments that American security guarantees in the Persian Gulf region cannot currently be enforced through military means. The credibility collapse is not theoretical. It is happening in real time as regional allies receive these communications and begin recalculating their strategic positioning in a Middle East where American military power has been demonstrated to be projectable but not sustainable when contested by prepared adversaries with geographic advantage. If this channel has been giving you the analysis that cuts through the noise of official narratives and mainstream defense commentary that refuses to acknowledge what is actually happening at the sharp edge of global power competition, now is the moment to make sure you never miss an update. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone in your network who is serious about understanding the permanent transformation of Middle Eastern strategic reality that is unfolding right now. Tonight's analysis takes you inside every dimension of this operation. The specific capabilities that Iran deployed to achieve maritime denial in the world's most critical energy transit corridor. The tactical situation facing 5,000 American troops now isolated behind Iranian control zones. The options analysis that Pentagon planners are presenting to political leadership and why every option carries costs that American decision makers are unwilling to accept. The strategic implications as regional powers watch American military force be neutralized without a single shot being fired at American territory. And the civilizational reckoning as the post-Cold War assumption that American military force can be projected globally without serious contest collapses in the narrow waters between Iran and Oman. The operational execution that closed the strait. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has spent 20 years developing a doctrine they internally call layered coastal defense, a strategic concept that acknowledges they cannot defeat the United States Navy in open ocean engagement, but can absolutely deny the U.S. Navy operational freedom in confined waters where geography eliminates the blue water advantages that American carrier strike groups depend on. What they executed in the Strait of Hormuz represents this doctrine, deployed with a comprehensiveness that exceeded even optimistic Iranian planning estimates. The operation began at 0300 local time with the simultaneous activation of 300 coastal defense positions that had been pre-positioned over 18 months of systematic preparation that Western intelligence either failed to detect or failed to properly assess the significance of. These positions house NOR anti-ship cruise missiles, Chinese-supplied C-802 variants, and the indigenous Qadir system, creating overlapping engagement zones that cover every square meter of navigable water in the strait with multiple redundant firing solutions. The missiles themselves carry 300-kilogram warheads with sea-skimming terminal approach profiles that make interception by shipboard defensive systems problematic even in ideal conditions. In the confined geography of the strait, where engagement windows are measured in seconds and defensive response time is compressed to the absolute minimum, interception probability degrades sharply. Simultaneously with the activation of the coastal missile batteries, IRGC Navy fast attack craft departed from concealed positions along the Iranian coastline in what Western observers are describing as the largest coordinated small boat operation since the Second World War. These are not the improvised speedboats that Western media coverage typically portrays when discussing Iranian naval capabilities. These are purpose-built military vessels equipped with precision-guided munitions, electronic warfare systems, and coordination networks that allow swarm tactics execution at scale. The Paykop-class boats carry Nasser anti-ship missiles. The Siraj-class boats carry Qusar missiles. The larger Sina-class corvettes provide area defense and coordination function. Over 200 vessels operating in integrated formations create targeting complexity that overwhelms the defensive processing capacity of any naval surface action group attempting to transit the strait. The third layer of the operation involves systematic deployment of bottom-moored and drifting naval mines across the deep water channels that large vessels must use to transit the strait safely. Iranian mine warfare capabilities have been consistently underestimated in Western assessments that focus on platforms and overlook the strategic effectiveness of area denial through simple but effective weapons that cost thousands of dollars to deploy and millions of dollars to safely clear. The mines are a combination of contact detonation types and influence-triggered designs that respond to acoustic or magnetic signatures. The latter category is particularly problematic because clearing them requires either accepting the loss of vessels to trigger detonation or conducting systematic minesweeping operations that would take weeks to complete in a contested environment where Iranian forces maintain fire control. The fourth and perhaps most sophisticated layer involves unmanned aerial systems deployed in swarm configurations that Western air defense architecture was never designed to engage. These are not the large, expensive reconnaissance drones that receive extensive media coverage. These are small, cheap, expendable systems produced in massive quantities and deployed with single-mission kamikaze mission profiles. Mohajer-6 drones provide reconnaissance and targeting data. Shahed 136 loitering munitions provide precision strike capability against stationary targets. Arash-2 systems provide anti-radiation capability against radar emitters. When deployed in formations exceeding 1,500 simultaneous contacts, they create air defense scenarios that simply cannot be managed with existing shipboard systems that were optimized for engaging small numbers of sophisticated threats rather than large numbers of simple threats. What makes this layered system genuinely formidable is not any single component, but the integration across domains that creates mutually supporting dilemmas for anyone attempting to counter it. To safely transit shipping, the mines must be cleared. But mine-clearing vessels cannot operate under missile threat. To neutralize the missile threat, the coastal batteries must be struck. But strike aircraft cannot operate effectively in an environment saturated with air defense systems and drone swarms. To suppress the air defenses, electronic warfare and anti-radiation strikes must be conducted. But those assets cannot survive the integrated engagement zones created by overlapping systems. Every solution requires first solving a prerequisite problem, creating operational paralysis. The IRGC planned this operation understanding that they did not need to destroy American naval forces. They simply needed to make the cost of forcing the strait unacceptable relative to the strategic value of maintaining Persian Gulf access. They have achieved exactly that calculation, and they did it without firing a single shot at American vessels, demonstrating through capability display rather than kinetic engagement that transit occurs only with Iranian permission or at costs the United States is unwilling to pay. The tactical nightmare facing 5,000 trapped American troops. The forward operating bases housing American military personnel across the Gulf Cooperation Council states were designed and positioned based on assumptions that now look catastrophically outdated. These assumptions included that American naval power could guarantee maritime supply lines, that American air power could maintain air superiority over the Persian Gulf region, that regional allies would remain aligned with American strategic interests under pressure, and that Iran lacked the capability or will to challenge American military presence directly. Every one of these assumptions has been invalidated in the 18 hours since the strait closure operation began. The personnel count varies by classification level and what categories of contractor forces are included, but the consensus estimate across Western intelligence agencies is approximately 5,000 American military personnel currently stationed at installations that are now effectively isolated behind the Iranian control zone. These forces include Air Force personnel operating from Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, Army units conducting advisory missions in Kuwait, Marine Corps elements based in Bahrain supporting the 5th Fleet Headquarters, and Special Operations Forces, distributed across the region on training and advisory missions. Their tactical situation is unprecedented in modern American military experience. These are not forces in active combat being overrun by enemy action. These are not hostages seized in a terrorist operation. These are military units conducting routine garrison operations who suddenly find themselves unable to be resupplied, unable to be reinforced, and unable to be evacuated through maritime means that represent the standard contingency planning for emergency withdrawal from the region. The overland routes that theoretically remain available traverse territories where American freedom of movement depends on host nation permission that is suddenly uncertain as those same host nations recalculate their strategic positions in response to the demonstrated Iranian capability. The immediate supply situation is not yet critical, but trends toward crisis on a timeline measured in weeks rather than months. The bases maintain stockpiles designed to support routine operations, not sustained isolation. Fuel reserves, ammunition stocks, spare parts inventories, medical supplies, and food stores were sized for normal consumption rates, with the assumption that maritime resupply would remain available. As regional allies observe the American response, or more precisely, the lack of effective American response, their willingness to permit use of their territory for logistical support becomes a negotiable question rather than an assumed cooperation. The air corridors that could theoretically allow aerial resupply and eventual aerial evacuation face their own complications. Iranian integrated air defense networks that were activated simultaneously with the Strait closure operation have created contested airspace across significant portions of the Persian Gulf region. The S-300 systems that Russia provided to Iran, the indigenous Bavar 373 long-range systems, the medium-range Khordad and Talash systems, and the short-range Tor and Pantsir networks create overlapping engagement zones that put transport aircraft at risk throughout the approach routes to American installations. Flying transport missions through contested airspace where loss probability is measured in double-digit percentages is not a sustainable logistics solution. But the deeper crisis is not logistical. It is political and strategic. The 5,000 American troops now trapped have become leverage in a negotiation that the United States did not anticipate and is not prepared to conduct. Iran has effectively seized hostages, not through terrorist kidnapping, but through professional military operations that created the tactical conditions for isolation without direct combat. The pressure on Washington to negotiate their safe withdrawal under terms that acknowledge Iranian control of the Strait represents exactly the kind of strategic humiliation that American political leadership across administrations has insisted would never be accepted. If you want analysis this sharp, this deep, this willing to challenge the official narratives that mainstream coverage refuses to question, subscribe now to ensure you never miss an update that reveals what is actually happening while others are still repeating press releases. The Pentagon has presented the White House with option sets that all involve accepting outcomes previously considered unacceptable. Option 1 involves negotiating directly with Tehran for guaranteed safe passage of withdrawing American forces in exchange for formal acknowledgement of Iranian security concerns regarding American military presence in the Gulf. This option preserves the troops but destroys American credibility with every regional ally who base their security calculations on assumptions of American commitment. Option 2 involves attempting forced evacuation through air corridors, accepting projected aircraft losses that would constitute the highest single incident casualty count for American forces since the Beirut barracks bombing. This option potentially recovers the personnel, but at human costs that would shatter domestic political support for Middle East engagement. Option 3 involves maintaining the forces in place while attempting to sustain them through overland routes dependent on host nation cooperation that becomes more uncertain daily as those nations watch American inability to respond effectively. This option delays the crisis but does not resolve it and allows the situation to deteriorate toward ultimate capitulation under worse conditions. Strategic strategic, chaotic paralysis, and the collapse of regional security architecture. The emergency sessions in allied capitals across the Middle East are revealing in their panic and their pragmatism. These governments built their security strategies on the foundational assumption that American military power, while sometimes unreliable in its political commitment, remained militarily overwhelming in its capabilities when deployed. The Strait of Hormuz closure has shattered that assumption by demonstrating that American military power can be neutralized through prepared defensive operations that leverage geographic advantage against technological superiority. Saudi Arabia is conducting urgent consultations with Beijing about security guarantees that do not depend on maritime access through waterways Iran can control. The United Arab Emirates is initiating diplomatic outreach to Tehran that would have been politically impossible 72 hours ago. Kuwait is quietly requesting that American advisory personnel begin transitioning their activities to lower-profile arrangements that do not create the appearance of American military presence requiring Iranian tolerance. Bahrain, hosting the Fifth Fleet headquarters, is discovering that the headquarters means nothing when the fleet itself cannot operate in the waters it was meant to control. Oman, maintaining its traditional neutrality, is offering to mediate negotiations between Washington and Tehran while carefully avoiding any commitment that could be interpreted as supporting American military operations. The speed of this allied recalculation is what genuinely terrifies American strategic planners. These are not gradual shifts in diplomatic positioning. These are emergency reassessments, driven by the recognition that American security guarantees are not currently enforceable through the military means that those guarantees were assumed to rest on. When a security guarantor demonstrates inability to protect itself, allies begin seeking alternative arrangements with remarkable speed. Israel faces its own strategic reckoning. The assumption that American naval power would remain available to support Israeli operations or deter Israeli adversaries has been foundational to Israeli strategic planning. The demonstration that Iran can deny American naval access to the Persian Gulf raises immediate questions about whether similar capabilities could deny American naval access to the Eastern Mediterranean in a crisis. The freedom of action that Israeli planners assumed they would maintain in confronting Iranian nuclear programs or proxy forces suddenly looks conditional on Iranian decisions about whether to contest American supporting operations. Russia and China are observing with satisfaction that aligns precisely with their long-term strategic objectives. For Moscow, the demonstration that American power can be successfully contested through prepared defensive operations validates the entire Russian approach to strategic competition. For Beijing, the revelation that geographic advantage can neutralize technological superiority has direct implications for Taiwan scenarios, where China possesses the geographic advantage and the United States would be operating at the end of extended logistics chains. Both powers are communicating to regional actors that the unipolar moment is definitively over and that security arrangements must now account for a multipolar reality where American power projection is contestable. The civilizational turning point, what is unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz, transcends tactical military events or even regional strategic competition. This represents a civilizational inflection point where the post-Cold War assumption of uncontested American global military dominance is being permanently revised through operational reality rather than theoretical argument. For 3 decades, the international system operated on the premise that American military force could be projected to any region of the globe and could accomplish its objectives when deployed. Adversaries might resist, but they would ultimately be defeated if the United States committed sufficient resources and accepted sufficient costs. Iran has now demonstrated that this premise is false when the adversary possesses geographic advantage, has prepared defensive capabilities systematically, and is willing to accept the costs of confrontation. They did not defeat the United States Navy in battle. They made battle itself unacceptably costly by creating tactical conditions where the United States must either accept Iranian terms or pay prices in casualties and equipment losses that American political culture cannot sustain. The implications ripple across every region where American security commitments rest on the assumption that American military force can be deployed when needed. NATO allies in Eastern Europe are watching and wondering whether American commitment to Article 5 is enforceable if Russia creates similar area denial conditions in the Baltic approaches. Asian allies are watching and calculating whether American extended deterrence remains credible if China can establish similar maritime control in the Western Pacific. Middle Eastern Western partners are watching and recognizing that American security guarantees are worth less than they believed when the guarantor cannot protect its own forces from isolation. The historical parallel is not to any specific military defeat, but to the broader pattern of hegemonic transition. Just as British naval supremacy was gradually revealed to be unsustainable in the face of rising peer competitors in the early 20th century, American military supremacy is being revealed as contestable by prepared regional powers in the early 21st century. The transition is not occurring through spectacular battlefield defeat, but through accumulating demonstrations that the costs of enforcing dominance exceed the benefits of maintaining it. Iran represents a civilization that has been under continuous external pressure for decades and has responded by developing capabilities specifically designed to contest external military power in their immediate region. They cannot project power globally. They cannot defeat the United States in open battle. But they can absolutely deny the United States operational freedom in the waters adjacent to their territory, and they have now proven it through operational demonstration rather than theoretical claim. The question facing Washington is whether to accept this new reality and adjust strategy accordingly, or to attempt restoration of previous dominance through escalation that carries civilization-ending risks. Subscribe to this channel because in a world this dangerous, analysis this sharp is not optional, it is necessary. The mainstream coverage will not tell you what you have heard here tonight. They will give you sanitized narratives that preserve comfortable assumptions. This channel gives you reality. The coming hours will determine whether this crisis ends in negotiated face-saving arrangements that acknowledge new strategic realities or escalates toward conflicts that no one can control. The 5,000 American troops trapped behind Iranian lines are not just military personnel in a difficult tactical situation. They are human markers of a historical transition from unipolar dominance to multipolar competition. Their fate will signal whether the United States accepts that transition or attempts to reverse it through force. The world is holding its breath. History is watching, and the era that began with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the proclamation of an American century may be ending in the narrow waters between Iran and Oman, where geography has defeated technology and preparation has neutralized supremacy. Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop asking the questions that matter.